The first time Boone and Hazel tore across our new backyard, I felt something shift, like the years of boxed-in living had finally exhaled. Boone, my broad-chested bloodhound with ears like velvet drapes, dove nose first into the earth, tail wagging like a flag of freedom. Hazel, lean and sharp-eyed, darted along the fence line like she was chasing off ghosts. After 15 years of city noise and cement porches, I had finally bought a slice of peace on the edge of Cedar Hills, or so I thought. The trouble arrived before the furniture. A white envelope was wedged into my front door by sundown. Inside, a letter embossed with the Cedar Hills HOA logo and worded like a court summons. According to Article 4, Section C, my dogs had already violated HOA policy by roaming outside a designated enclosure, never mind that they were inside a 6-foot privacy fence on my own land. But what caught my attention wasn't the rule, it was the signature. In tight, slanted script, Karen Reinhardt, HOA president. I had met her only once, in passing. She'd stopped by during my move-in, uninvited, clutching a clipboard and wearing a smile so tight it looked painful. "Just keeping the community in shape," she'd said, scanning my truck like it carried nuclear waste. "We like things orderly around here." That we didn't include me. Not really. Karen Reinhardt had lived in Cedar Hills since it was built, and from what I'd already heard at the local diner, she'd never let anyone forget it. Widowed, young and without children, she poured her time and a frankly alarming amount of energy into the HOA. The neighborhood called her the Queen of Cedar Hills, though never to her face. She maintained immaculate flower beds, enforced obscure regulations like she was born with a badge, and allegedly once fined a neighbor for unsightly wind chimes. Her house stood at the corner of the cul-de-sac, windows always gleaming, cameras pointing in every direction. No dog ever barked within 50 yards without her taking note, so when Boone let out a bellowing bark on his second morning and Hazel chased a squirrel up a maple, it was inevitable. Karen struck quickly. 2 days later, another letter. This time it included still frames, grainy images of Boone mid-run, Hazel digging enthusiastically by the fence. Each photo was time-stamped, circled in red ink. A postscript read, "Consider this your final warning before formal action is taken." It wasn't just a letter, it was a shot across the bow. I tried to take it in stride. Retired firefighter, twice deployed vet, and a man who dealt with real chaos. I wasn't about to be rattled by a suburban clipboard warrior. But this wasn't about policy, it was about territory. 3 days later, the sheriff showed up. "Mr. McAllister?" he asked, stepping out of his cruiser, boots crunching on gravel. "Yup," I said, crossing my arms. "Got a call about aggressive dogs. Said they'd gotten loose, scared a child, possibly bit someone." I stared at him. "They've been fenced in all day. Cameras can prove it." As if on cue, Boone loped over, tongue out, tail thumping. Hazel sat down beside him, alert but calm. The deputy scratched Boone's ear and shook his head. "I figured, but I've got to follow up." I sighed. "Karen." He nodded slowly. "Just between us, you're not the first." After he left, I walked the perimeter of my fence. No gaps, no loose boards. Just 2 loyal dogs and a neighbor with too much time and too little conscience. That night, I installed security cameras. Not because I was afraid, but because I could smell what was coming by the end of the week. My trash bins had been tipped over twice. One morning I found a nail lodged in my tire. And on Friday, a certified letter arrived claiming I was operating a commercial kennel without a license. I didn't need a crystal ball to see who was behind it, but then, something changed. Boone started lingering by the eastern fence line, nose twitching, ears up. Hazel would follow, tail low, body tense. There was something on the other side, something they could sense, even if I couldn't. I stood there one morning, coffee in hand, watching them sniff a patch of overgrown bramble behind Karen's lot. Wasn't the first time Boone had sensed trouble. And I'd learned long ago when a hound freezes like that, you listen. I didn't know it yet, but Karen wasn't just gunning for my dogs. She was hiding something, and Boone had just caught the scent. Karen didn't just want me gone, she wanted me broken. By the second week, her crusade escalated from passive-aggressive letters to outright psychological warfare. Every day brought a new violation notice, each more ridiculous than the last. My front porch lanterns were non-compliant with HOA-approved wattage. My lawn was half an inch too long. Even Boone's water bowl, placed under a shaded tree, was labeled a potential mosquito breeding hazard. She wielded bylaws like weapons, selectively, surgically, and the HOA board, either too afraid or too apathetic, signed off on her every whim. Still, I refused to bend. I attended the next HOA meeting held in Karen's backyard, where she sat in a white plastic throne under a gazebo festooned with lavender bunting. The board members, 5 timid homeowners, more concerned with keeping their hedges trimmed than challenging authorities, sat beside her like royal courtiers. The air was sticky, the mood tense. I stood my ground. My dogs are within my fenced property. They don't bark excessively. They haven't harmed anyone. You can't ban me from letting them out in my own yard. Karen adjusted her sunglasses with theatrical slowness. Mr. McAllister, Cedar Hills is a community of order. We all make sacrifices for the good of the whole. Order, I repeated. Is that what you call threatening to fine me $500 a day over a dog bowl? She leaned forward, voice syrupy. This isn't personal, but rules are rules. I scanned the board. Not one made eye contact. Then Karen smiled like a cat that had cornered a bird. Unless you want to take this up with the county zoning board. I bit my tongue. A zoning complaint meant endless paperwork, fees, inspections, a bureaucratic swamp she knew I'd sink into, but I didn't flinch. You're bluffing, her smile vanished. We'll see. That night, someone dumped a bag of raw chicken, scraps along my back fence. Boone nearly tore up the grass, sniffing them out. Hazel barked for hours, agitated and alert. My cameras caught nothing. Someone had snipped the wires earlier that day. I had no proof, but my gut knew. Karen wasn't just hiding behind policies anymore. She was playing dirty the next morning. I walked the edge of my property with both dogs at my side. When we reached the far eastern corner, where the trees thickened and privacy fences gave way to wild bramble, Boone froze. Again, his head lifted, nose twitching toward a patch of brush behind Karen's lot. Hazel crouched low, ears twitching, her body rigid. Boone took a cautious step forward and growled a low warning sound I hadn't heard since my firefighting days, when he'd once alerted me to a gas leak before a single alarm went off. I stepped closer, parting the brush. That's when I saw it. Tucked behind a tangle of faux foliage and a slatted wooden screen was a shed. Not a typical garden shed, but something larger, reinforced, painted a dull gray to blend in with the shadows. It wasn't visible from the street, nor from any aerial map I'd seen when researching the neighborhood. It certainly wasn't listed on any HOA property diagram. The shed was padlocked, the door scarred with claw marks, and it reeked. The kind of chemical rot you don't forget. Bitter, metallic, wrong. Boone whimpered, backing up. Hazel growled softly. I didn't go closer, not yet. I wasn't stupid. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few quick photos. Then I turned and headed straight for City Hall. What I found deepened the mystery. That lot, originally part of a 5-acre undeveloped greenbelt, had been rezoned 2 years ago, conveniently added to HOA maintenance jurisdiction but never formally reassigned on paper. Which meant, technically, it didn't belong to Karen or the HOA, and the shed, not registered. No permit, no inspection record. Nothing. She was hiding something. Something big that night. I watched from my window as Karen scurried out in a raincoat, flashlight in hand, disappearing into the trees. Minutes later, a faint flicker of light blinked behind. The bramble then vanished. She thought no one saw, but Boone had sniffed out the truth, and now, so had I. The war wasn't just about dogs anymore. It was about secrets, and Karen had just given me a reason to dig deeper. I didn't sleep that night. At every creak of the wind, every rustle of leaves outside sent Boone pacing the floors and Hazel growling low from her perch at the window. My mind kept circling that shed, its hidden location, its industrial smell, the fresh claw marks Boone had left on the padlocked door. Something illegal was going on. I could feel it, and now that I'd seen it, I was certain Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was hiding behind them by sunrise. I had a plan. I gathered all the documentation I'd collected, photographs of the shed, property zoning maps, a screenshot of the HOA charter, and a printed copy of Karen's original complaint letters. I also brought footage from my newly rewired cameras, grainy but clear enough to show Karen skulking through the trees in the dead of night. Flashlight in hand, I walked into the sheriff's office just after opening. Deputy Raines, the same man who'd visited me about the dog complaint, raised an eyebrow when he saw me. She at it again? He asked, already half smiling. You could say that, I replied, placing the file on his desk. I think she's hiding something dangerous. He flipped through the photos in silence. When he got to the shed, he leaned back slowly, said, "This isn't on the official HOA records, not a trace. And the chemicals inside whatever she's storing, my dogs don't even want to go near them." Boone's trained. He alerted like he smelled a gas line leak. Raines nodded slowly, the humor fading from his face. "You leave this with me. I'll talk to the city inspector. If what you're saying holds up, we'll go out there ourselves." I left feeling lighter, not victoriously, but for the first time, I had momentum. This wasn't a neighborly spat anymore. It was a legal problem, a criminal one. Karen didn't know that the game had changed, but she found out soon enough. 2 days later, 3 vehicles pulled into Cedar Hills unannounced. 1 sheriff's cruiser, 1 city code enforcement van, and 1 white pickup with the county seal stamped on the door. They parked just outside Karen's home and walked toward the wooded edge of her property. I stood on my porch with Boone and Hazel at my sides, watching. 10 minutes passed before they emerged from the bramble, their expressions grim. The code officer held up a clipboard, speaking into a radio. The sheriff's deputy followed with a bolt cutter in hand. Karen stormed out of her house, like a woman possessed. "You can't do this. This is private property. I demand a lawyer." Raines calmly held up his hand. "Ma'am, the land is listed as communal greenbelt property under HOA maintenance. You've been storing unauthorized hazardous chemicals on land that doesn't legally belong to you." I treat lawns. I help this neighborhood, she screeched. You don't understand. We understand perfectly, he said, voice flat. The bolt cutter snapped. The shed door groaned open. The smell hit even from where I stood, backward sharp. Chemical. Inside were rows of sealed containers labeled with faded foreign warnings. Black market, pesticides. Some banned in the US, others restricted to industrial farming, not residential use. There were also sprayers, gloves, invoices, documents connecting Karen to unlicensed pesticide treatments dating back at least a year. Apparently, she'd been charging HOA members extra for premium lawn care services, while secretly treating their yards at night with banned chemicals. Several residents had reported strange illnesses in pets. One family's vegetable garden had withered inexplicably. Now we knew why. Karen was handcuffed within the hour. Watching her get loaded into the cruiser, head low, shoulders shaking, not from remorse but rage, I felt no triumph, just clarity. Her tyranny had always been about control. Her rules just camouflage. The board called an emergency meeting that night. This time, they didn't meet in Karen's backyard under lavender bunting. They met in the town hall, and this time, the residents showed up. They were angry. Some wanted to sue. Others wanted the HOA disbanded. But most just wanted the power, shifted away from one self-anointed ruler and back into the hands of the community. By the end of the night, Karen had been officially removed from her position. A special election was scheduled. All dog restrictions were suspended pending review. I walked out quietly, Boone at my side, knowing full well that the cleanup was just beginning. Because while Karen's shed had been exposed, the system that let her build it in the shadows still stood, and I wasn't done yet. Cedar Hills changed after Karen's arrest, but not overnight. The board tried to act like they'd never backed her tyranny. At the next HOA meeting, they wore somber expressions and spoke in rehearsed tones, insisting they had been misled. But the community wasn't buying it anymore. With Karen gone, the mask had slipped. Neighbors who once whispered complaints in private now spoke freely. Stories poured out: fines for mailbox color, surveillance through hedges, secret HOA charges that never appeared on budgets. Karen had ruled through fear, and the board had enabled her because it was easy. But now, it was our turn. I declined the nomination to take Karen's place. I wasn't interested in power-only balance, but I did volunteer to help rewrite the HOA bylaws. This time, dogs weren't considered nuisances. Surveillance without consent was banned. Anonymous complaints eliminated. The most poetic part, that hidden plot behind Karen's house, the one she used to stash her poisons, was converted into a community dog park. We built it using volunteer labor and funds reclaimed from the illegal premium lawn service fees Karen had collected. Over the years, Boone and Hazel were the first to run its open stretch. No fences, no leashes, just freedom. But the biggest justice came in court. Karen's charges stacked up like bricks: environmental violations, illegal pesticide use, misuse of HOA funds, operating without a business license, and endangerment. The prosecution brought in neighbors who had gotten sick. One elderly woman testified about her dog dying after a lawn treatment. A mother described how her toddler developed breathing issues. The judge didn't hold back. Karen was sentenced to 2 years in county jail and fined nearly $80,000 in restitution. Her property went into foreclosure before sentencing, and the very camera system she had installed, her so-called neighborhood watch, ended up providing the bulk of the evidence against her. I was asked to speak during sentencing. I kept it short. I moved here to find peace. I said she made it a war, but it was my dogs trained to protect, not attack, who found what none of us could see. Justice sniffed her out. The courtroom was silent. When I left, Boone was waiting outside. He sat tall, his eyes scanning the horizon like he always did, sensitive, vigilant, loyal. He didn't understand what we'd won. He only knew I was safe now. That was enough for him. Weeks passed. Cedar Hills found its rhythm again, but something deeper had shifted. Neighbors who used to nod stiffly now lingered to chat. Porch lights stayed on later. Kids laughed outside again without fear of being cited for excessive noise. The fear Karen had cultivated like a garden of thorns had been pulled up by the roots. One evening, I received a handwritten letter in my mailbox. No stamp, just folded neatly, sealed with tape. Inside was a note from an elderly man across the street. For years, she made me feel like I didn't belong in the neighborhood I helped build. Thank you for standing up. You reminded me it's still home. I didn't keep the note. I framed it because that, to me, was the victory, not Karen's downfall. Not the rewrites or the elections, but the reminder that decency could outlast cruelty, and that truth, no matter how long it stays buried, always finds air. Boone and Hazel still walk the fence line every morning. They pause where the shed once stood, sniff the ground, then trot along content. The spot's quiet now, replaced with a wooden bench and a plaque that reads, "To the ones who see what others don't." People think dogs are just animals, but they know, they feel. And in this case, they led the way. Karen thought she could bury her secrets under layers of policy and intimidation. But Boone smelled the rot before I ever did. And in the end, it wasn't her rules that brought her down, it was her scent.